So Geordie, you're teaching a workshop on Python on CGCircuit, and how many sessions did you do so far? Is it three,
I've done four. I've done
four?
four sessions. Yeah, five is
Okay.
about to start. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So can you give us a little bit of like a general outline of what you cover in the
Sure.
workshop?
So just as a preface, like I've been saying, I like to build things, little building blocks. I make people keep expanding their homework every week. So the first week is something really simple, and they can be like, "Oh, this is easy." Oh, but then I take that code and I put it in a function. And I
Mm,
take that function, like on week 5, and we put it in and then week 3 we put it in a module. In week 4 we put that in a class in that module, and
mm,
then I like to take that same robot that they built or whatever spiral staircase,
yeah.
move it along because I want them to see how easy it is to just keep adding to the
Mm,
code, right? To reach your location. So for the very first week, we kind of get set up. I suggest using Sublime or Atom, whichever one you want to use, and then give a tour of the script editors, talk about the tools you'll need. Like you can download everything for free pretty much. Sublime, you can get a training version of Maya for free now for the duration of the class if you need to, just from Autodesk. So everything's
mhm,
free. Um, I give a tour of the script editor, how to set your script editor up, some useful things on Sublime. The reason I love Sublime is because it has like 2 shortcut keys are all you need to memorize to become a
mm,
Python programmer. That's it.
yeah.
Control P and Control Shift P. That's all you need. Then week 2, and then I make them build a model. I teach them like several commands inside of Maya, like the move commands, rotate, translate. And I want them to build like a simple model of like 5 or 6 different primitives,
Mhm,
a robot or a tree or a building, something. And they save that. Week 2, I teach them like variables, dictionaries, lists. We start talking about the data structures inside of Python. The most common ones are like dictionaries, lists, variables. And I stick to that for a while. I don't go into like tuples or anything for like the next week.
mhm,
I show it, but I don't go into it. Then we talk about for loops, like how to iterate over something. So if I wanted to just stack a bunch of cubes up or something,
mhm,
how could I do that and just increment the height every round? So they're just getting their feet wet and kind of understanding like how to split a string. Like these are essential things in Python. How to get just maybe the first 4 characters or the last characters. In week 3, it's more fundamentals. We actually build functions, and we
mm,
talk about the arguments inside of a function, what a doc string is, the variables, and we start discussing scope, the LEGB principle, the local, enclosed, global, and then I forget what the B stands for, but
mhm,
it's the same as G basically. It's like basically the file system. So we talk about closures and string formatting. String formatting is important because it's used all over Python,
mm,
older string formatting and the newer string formatting, and
yeah.
there's even a new Python 3.5 version of string formatting if that isn't enough confusing. So we'll talk about all those. And I start making them use string formatting. So instead of just adding plus symbols, I make
Mhm,
them start putting it in their code, and I'll ding them if they don't put it in
mm,
because you want to start using it. Week 4, core concepts. Like I call it the essential kung fu because week 4 is where you need to be before you learn object-oriented programming. You need to understand what an iterator is,
mhm,
what a set is, what a list comprehension, what a generator is. We never create any of them in class, but I want you to understand what they are, so I break them down and actually generate a few of them and show them.
okay.
And in that week, we talk about the differences between 2.7 and 3 too. So
Mm,
I have I use Anaconda with 2 separate environments, one with 2.7 and one with 3, and I'll show the exact same code in both. And we can compare it along the way, like a dictionary and this iterator, et cetera.
okay.
So that this class has like some life in it, when 3 starts to take off.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Makes
Week
sense.
5 is object-oriented programming. We take all your spiral staircase and everything and just slap it into a class where you have to initiate the class and then run a function on that class to generate your spiral staircase.
Mhm,
I just wanted to see how easy it is just by like indenting your code one level and putting class up there. You've just put it as a child of the class. So
yep.
yeah, so we spend a lot of time doing that. Class that whole week is explaining key concepts like polymorphism and duck typing and the phrases that you hear floating around the internet or on Stack Exchange.
Yep. Yeah, yeah.
The heck is self?
Yes.
For years, like, what's self?
Exactly.
Why is it automatically passed in as an argument? So, and then week 6, we take a break from that, because by that time it's like boot camp. They've had 5 weeks of just Python, 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 Python.
Yep.
Now we're like, let's go design a GUI. So we take them into Qt Designer and we just build a quick little UI. And then I have them convert that UI to Python. And then I have them build a UI where they press buttons and it makes like a cube, a cone, and a sphere, simple stuff.
Yep.
And they can actually launch that UI. Then I take their homework, the class structure that they have, and the UI, and I have them make a UI that can actually do things with the class that they generate to do stuff. So they're pressing buttons, and their UI generating the model that they built. Like that.
Oh, nice.
So they're building on it. And then 7, 8 are 2 weeks of in-depth UIs. We set aside all their original stuff, and we start building what's called an API and in PyML, and then a UI that calls that. So they're 2 separate files. And then they got to kind of iterate those in the same versioning structure as they go along.
Okay.
And they learn Pickle and JSON. They learn how to save things to disk, how to read things off of disk, how to parse text files. And eventually they end up making this really cool UI that stores controller cons, and then is also an API. So if they're a rigger, they can actually they never have to launch the UI. They can just launch it with code, and it can generate all the cons that you need for wrists and fingers and stuff like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. I always thought it was a really good tool, and Ofer actually made me write that years ago in PyML, and I've always thought that was the tool that made me see. I got all the way to like a point where I was like, I can actually do this. It gave me confidence. My coefficient of confidence was very high.
Nice.
After that, so after that, week 9. Week 9 is like pipeline stuff for pipeline people. Regular expressions, paths on disk using the path module, Maya standalone, running things in Maya, using subprocesses. And in that week, I try and explain what standard in, standard out, and standard error are. And that's because I've just introduced subprocess, and people are just like, what the heck is that? Especially if you've been on Windows your whole life, you're like, none of these statements mean anything.
Yeah.
Only when you go to a Linux box and you start working at a company with Linux do people start using these terms more, and you're like, what the hell is a pipe? What the hell are these things? So I explain that, and I have Cygwin running on my machine when I do it. I explain it just like a Linux interface, so I can explain that. And I go through the history of Unix. In the history of regex, so I go through regular expressions. I talk about where they came from and why they're so important. But I tell them, don't bother to memorize it because you'll never remember it. You never use it.
That's good to know. That is good to know. You never know. In an interview, you can impress some people.
Yeah, I'll just have it like on the side, like I have my cheat sheet. Like, what would I do? Oh yeah, I'll just do this. Yeah, and then it ends with a detailed look at subprocess. Subprocess is probably the most powerful thing I use all the time at work. Subprocess, I can leave Maya, send some data off to some, like Houdini, go process something in Houdini, drop something on disk, continue on with that process, launch Maya again, get the result, launch another program like Massive or whatever, go, and you can move stuff between applications with subprocess. And by putting things on disk and making sure they exist and stuff. So I have a process there where, I get a random name off a website, and I use that to name a cube in Maya. And then I do something with it. So I go to the website with the subprocess, then name a cube in Maya, and then save it. So it's super simple, but you can see the process of building a chain of subprocesses. Yeah.
That's cool. That's great. So you definitely cover a lot of things. It seems like you go from the very basics, and then you get to more and more advanced. So who do you think this workshop is for?
It's for 2 groups of people. One is maybe 3 groups of people. I would say it's for beginners who want to take the course, get as far as they can. With their time, their energy, their patience, with not getting frustrated, get as far as you can, I ask them. And then for the other guys that want to go all the way through and just do it, they want to build a graphical user interface. There's people that have never worked with PySet or PyQt. They've always wanted to make a UI. I have a student now that loves these things. He's just, when he learned how to make UI, he makes UI for everything now. Everything's a
That's
UI,
awesome.
you know, even like simple sliders and stuff. You don't need it, but yeah, it's a UI. So he's just fascinated with it. And I'm like, okay, little animation tools, great.
That's awesome.
So it's for those people, but it's also for, lastly, I would say it's for someone who kind of wants a comprehensive grasp of what would be required to be in our industry in this day and age. Like, kind of need to know the lingo, and you kind of need an example to work with. And I'm trying to provide all of that, those three things, like graphical user interface, the essentials of Maya 2.7, 3, just Maya or Python in general, and then something that a beginner can come back to. So I fully expect a lot of these people are going to get to like week 5 or 6, kind of check out for a little while, maybe come back like 2 months later, and then finish it in their own time.
I see.
Because I definitely ramp up, like the difficulty definitely ramps up like this. But I didn't want to pad the videos with useless stuff like, oh, in the next video, you know. In the early days, I felt there were some training videos that padded it just to reach like a 3-hour limit.
Yeah.
So I just jam it full of everything. Jam it kitchen sink. So yeah.
Okay, that's great. And you know, so the workshop usually, I mean, the workshop that you're running is 9 weeks long, right?
Yeah.
And then every week you do a webinar.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about how do you like to run that webinar?
Sure. So typically I have somewhere anywhere between 1 to, I think the most I had one was 8 students. And usually I start with whoever gets there first. I ask them the first question, like, hey, what's going on? What's broken in your code? Can I help you with anything? And I video record all of them, and they put them all in a Google group or a G drive for the students to look at later. If we cover something and they feel like they might have missed something while they're taking notes, or they're like, wait, how did you do that? They can always go back and scrub the video and take a look. So I like to just ask questions, like, who's got a question? And then I will go down the list, like, you know, and in Zoom there's a list of attendees. I will hit each attendee and ask them if they have a question. Some of them are silent lurkers and just want to just be there for the watching of it and be present. But some of them are really active too, and they just have so many good questions, and they always stump.
That's cool.
There's a stumper every webinar, and usually I have to go off and investigate it and then come back.
Yeah. Okay. And like, if somebody can't, like, if somebody cannot attend the webinar, you know, you record it so they can watch it. But do you also, you know, get people that ask you questions, you know, maybe on the a Google group or on the forum, and then you answer that question on the live webinar so that everybody can understand, can listen to you.
And if I feel like I've seen, like, sometimes it's weird, all the students will get everything, and then one class, and then the next class, like, they all didn't know how to use the xform command or something like that. I'm like, did I miss that? I totally missed that. So I created an xform command video in like week workshop 2, and then I made that part of workshop 1 too, and then I posted it up on the Google group and said, hey, all of you are missing this.
I see.
This is useful to know. You should probably know about this command. So they're teaching me kind of where my gaps in knowledge are too. But if I feel like somebody's like in the Netherlands or is in a time zone that's completely diametrically opposed to me, like they're always asleep when I'm awake, I'll try and give them a little bit more extra time in their homework. And because I usually do like up to about 20 minutes when I'm reviewing homework of best practices, and I'll go through their code and explain why they should do A or B. So I will, I'll just try and give a little extra time because they can't make the webinar. So
cool.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. And what kind of questions do students usually ask you? And I think, like, what kind of questions do you think they should ask? You know, because, you know, I think that a workshop is a great opportunity for people to have you there, people with experience, right? So what are the questions that you hope that they ask, and the questions that you get?
It's funny, like most of the questions I get are like, why would I do something in Python versus the Maya API, like C? Why would I do something in C? And I have to explain to them like what the process of C is. Like, you have to compile something in a plugin, and sometimes you have to restart Maya to get the plugin to work. And so it's a lot easier to mock up something in Python You know, make sure that your concept works, and then go back and change it in to see if you need to. But every plugin you could ever write would work in Python. But it's not ideal, especially if you're iterating over like large meshes or stuff like that. It's super slow. So questions like that, like they don't understand the difference between why would you want to do something like a deformer in C++ and do a deformer in Python? Like what's the benefits of each? You know, development in Python and then complete optimization and speed in C.
I see.
So that's one question. Another one is it's really frustrating for them to understand like why things are the way they are in PySide and PyQt. Because PySide and PyQt has, you know, I'm sure you've probably built a UI at some point. They have their own little intricacies and their own little thought processes. You know, you know, the pump message, the message system and stuff like that. You have to explain how an event like a button click can be captured by a function like that. So it's hard to explain that sometimes.
Okay. And so that's one of some of the questions. Is this one of the questions that they ask, or one of the questions that you hope they ask?
No, they ask. Another one is, I thought I'd learn more absolute Maya Python, and I have to explain to them sometimes, like the Python inside of Maya, like Maya commands, is literally a wrapper around Mel. It's a wrapper around Mel in a Pythonic wrapper around Mel. But everything is a string. I said Python is way more powerful than just Maya commands. So I'm trying to give you the power of Python. Then when you go to Maya commands, you know exactly how to. I'm trying to teach them to teach themselves. So a lot of times people just want to be taught things, and they don't want to go on their own and learn like a function that does something. I make them convert Mel to Python. That's one of the. I give them a little tool in PyMel to do it. Like there's this little UI that in Maya that you can actually click a button, paste in some Mel, and it'll spit back the Python for you. And I use that to get them kind of push them out into the Python world.
That's cool. And that's actually makes me think of another question here. You know, your workshop is learn Python inside of Maya, right? But do also people that are not using Maya, would they benefit from watching your workshop?
Yes, it's actually, I would say those people that I just use Maya as sort of the vehicle, the mechanism. And I do some stuff in there, like I use to build some 3D text and stack it up. It is actually probably geared more to people understanding just generic Python. It is a way to learn Python. I'm using Maya as the method, but I'm using the Maya commands to do things, to explain things. But generally, I would say those people even benefit more, to answer your question. The people that are not going to just use Maya, the people that are pipeline TDs or want to do some kind of like scientific visualization and stuff and parse giant text files from a scientist somewhere, you know, with Python, and make a visualization of that somewhere. Like those are the people that would definitely benefit the most.
Cool. So what I like to do now is to go through a fire round. Okay. So I'm going to ask you a quick questions, and you give me your immediate answers and thoughts.
Okay.
So super quick.
Okay, I'm going to try to. Okay.
All right. So what is your favorite book and why?
Boy Wonder by Robert James Baker, because it is the only book I've ever seen that loved Hollywood the way I loved Hollywood when I was kind of growing up, but it's told entirely in excerpts as if people are being interviewed in a documentary. So it's like a book. It's fiction. It's completely fiction about this famous director called Shark Traeger. The book is impossible to find nowadays, but it's definitely by far my favorite book. It was just insane. It's an insane ride about this kid that's like this fat kid in the 50s, and he grows up to be the most famous director ever to took like every crazy 70s story, 80s and 90s story of like raging lunatic directors and kind of baked it all into this one character, and
that's awesome.
Holding a gun point to people's head to make them write a screenplay and snorting coke, and it's just crazy stuff, like all the crazy Hollywood moments. And then he's completely poor and destitute on the street, and he's like homeless for years. he rises back to stardom, and then he ends up dying after he like wins his Oscars.
Oh man,
amazing. Yeah, it's totally cool.
that's great. So also other question, what's to learn after Python?
I think I'm kind of interested in Go, because Go seems to be kind of picking up.
Mm-hmm.
Rust is also out there, but I'm also interested in R because of the data science thing. R is also bigger. So I'm going to try a little bit of each one of those and just see how I like each one, because I'm sure one of them will appeal to me and another one will smell like Java and I'll walk away. I can't stand Java.
I see. What's your favorite animated film and why?
Oh, wow. That's so hard. Kung Fu Panda 1. Yeah, Kung Fu Panda 1.
And why? Why?
I love Kung Fu, and it was the first movie where I saw excellent Kung Fu in tunes. It was just amazing. Like, it's never happened before ever until that movie.
Totally
and it was
agree.
really well choreographed. And it was hilarious, and I loved Jack Black as Poe, and even the opening credits were fantastic. And all of the Kung Fu Pandas are really, really entertaining as far as that goes. Great animation.
Yeah, I agree.
And I love kind of chunky characters. Like, as a rigger, I'm always like, how did they stop the pinching of the deformation under the underarms? And how do they move his weight around without, like, bunching up geometry? So
that's awesome. Yeah, I tend to get like, I was just talking to my wife today and I said, man, DreamWorks has done such amazing job with Kung Fu Panda.
I even looked Penguins of Madagascar for that too.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
I haven't watched that.
And I think my favorite short was Octopody. Do you remember that a few years ago? The octopus that has to save the other octopus before the guy chops him, and then they chase the octopus. The octopus are jumping through swimming pools.
A short, right?
Driving along. Yeah, it's from the guys, yeah.
I remember that.
I love that short. My kids watch it. It's on my wife's laptop. They watch it every day. They're like, Octopody! And it's like 10 years old now, and they still want to watch it. Yeah,
that's cool. Prediction on VR.
Well, I think it's gonna evolve. I think it will be around. I think AR will probably take hold first, because you'll be able to use your average surroundings and they don't have to render everything in screen. So AR will take over first. There'll be some really cool AR thing that happens, like Pokemon Go was just the beginning. I think there'll be some kind of Pokemon Go-esque game that just takes the nation by storm. And then pretty soon everybody will want the same headgear, like Vive or like Oculus or something, and then pretty soon you'll just have people living in those worlds, and then somebody will make a movie and there's already people doing this, make movies for these things. So instead of like a little square, you'll be in an entire environment, and I think that's when VR will take over, when that movie happens.
Yep.
And it'll be a movie where there's something going on in every corner, like a fight over here and a fight over here. So every time you watch it, you can find, it'll be like sewing 4 different movies together, right? It's kind of going on. Yeah.
So which one do you think in like 5-10 years is going to be bigger, AR or VR?
AR will peak I think will kick ass first, and then VR will follow right after that movie.
Okay.
And then interactive movies, if you can finally be in a movie, that's going to be the next one. A game that is a movie that you can be in. And then, like, I read in Ready Player One where they the thing that swept the nation was taking old movies from like the 80s, converting them to VR where you could be in them as an AI, your favorite 80s film.
Yeah, my God.
That was like, it was just mentioned as an aside in Ready Player One, and I was like, holy shit, that is actually going to happen.
That's awesome.
That's actually going to happen, yeah.
And last question, Batman versus Superman, who wins and why?
Superman for sure.
And why?
He's just he's a deity. He's a god, basically. He can hear atoms move. Regardless of what his moral code is, or there's just nothing a simple human with billions of dollars in their account can do to a guy who can lift a key that weighs the weight of a dwarf star, right? I mean, Superman appears dumb in comic books, but I think if you have somebody who's smart and super strong, you just can't have it. He'll inhabit all this oxygen in the room, so they have to have other characters to make conflicts in the story. So
Mm-hmm.
they dial back his intelligence unless he's going up against Brainiac or something like that.
I see.
Yeah. So
cool.
Yeah.
All right, Geordie. Thank you very much for spending the time with us. It was great to talk to you.
Cool, man. Thanks.
All right.
Yeah, cool.
I will see you around.
Okay, cool.
Bye.
Send me your student. It's a challenge. I'm challenged now.
Oh, yeah. I will definitely do that.
We're going to follow up on that.
Sounds good.
Okay, cool.
All right. Take it easy.
Man. I'll see you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.